Hello everyone. Now I am before you to teach you about protectionist trade policy. Dear friends, this protectionist trade policy came into existence after the outbreak of World War and Great Depressions of 1930s. What is protectionist trade policy or policy of protection? It means that a measure of policies or policy measures adopted by a domestic economy with respect to its international trade to protect the domestic industries. How it helps the domestic industries? See, when there is a free trade, the foreign commodities will move from their destination to the domestic economy very freely, and it makes a very severe competition over the domestic goods, and gradually it leads to the downfall of the domestic industries. The protectionist trade policy makes the domestic industries to produce more and more of commodity by protecting the foreign competition. Dear friends, protectionist trade policy means a policy measure adopted by the domestic economy against foreign competition with a view to protect the domestic industries. Now, shall we go for the slides? Yes, protection refers to a trade policy involving imposition of various kinds of restrictions on foreign trade. Protection is advocated as an instrument to protect home industries against foreign competition, as I said before you. The major instruments of protection includes imposition of tariff, quotas and import licenses, import embargo, export duties on raw materials, exchange control, subsidies to producers and exporters, price discrimination, commodity agreements, state trading, administrative protection and so on. These are the important protection mechanism which can be imposed by domestic economy over foreign commodities. Here we go with the slide that the term protection refers to a policy whereby domestic industries are to be protected from foreign competition. The aim is to impose restriction on the imports of low priced products in order to encourage domestic industries. The entire slide tells us the fact that whatever the protection mechanism are taken by the government, it is only for the sake of encouraging of domestic industries by imposing different kinds of barriers on the movement of foreign goods to domestic economy. There are different benefits or advantages from this protectionist trade policy or policy of protection. What are they? The first argument is infant industry argument. This argument was propounded by Alexander Hamilton of US by 1790, and later it was developed by Frederick List during 1885. The argument says that the industries which are in infant stage need to be protected in their initial stages. If a country allows in its infant stage the foreign commodity, at that time the infant industry will collapse. This is what the argument given by Alexander Hamilton. Please look over the slide. The contention of the argument is that the newly established industries would not be able to compete with the established foreign industries in the early years of their existence. Hence, in order to enable these industries to survive and become efficient in course of time, it is necessary that they be protected in the early stages. Unless the infant industries are protected, they cannot grow. Even such industries need to be protected, but there are some of criticisms that at what extent they must be protected. If economy protects the industry for its lifetime, then certainly it never allows the industries to grow. Even there are different kinds of limitations, whatever the limitations, but the industries need to be protected at their infant stages. The second is diversification of industries. If a industry is protected by imposing certain kind of restrictions or giving subsidies over domestic goods and restrictions over foreign commodities, it helps the domestic industries to expand their ideas their branch, their units. It helps for their diversification all over. So this is what the other important advantage. And the third one is revenue argument. A revenue argument says that if the domestic industries are protected by giving of subsidies or imposing of restrictions over foreign commodities, definitely it helps to bring very huge source of revenue to the central government or state bodies. The next one is protection of employment. If protection is given to the domestic industries, then certainly it gives a very huge employable capacity to the domestic industries. At the same time, it helps to provide much number of employment opportunities to the domestic workers who are well educated and well qualified. To this case, we can say that if there is no protection, foreign goods comes very freely to the domestic economy and it leads to the shutdown of domestic industries. As a result, many number of employment will be closed. So to avoid all these things, protection to domestic industries need to be given. And one more is balance of payment argument. Dear friends, this balance of payment means the difference between values of receipts and payments. Values of receipt means the amount which a country gets for its export, and payment means the amount a country has to be given to the foreign destination for its imports. When protection is given to the domestic industries, at that time the country can produce more of commodities so that it can export to the foreign destinations or different countries of the world, so that it can earn much more foreign exchange. So it is a benefit. The next is anti-dumping agreement or argument. Anti-dumping argument means it is a very favor statement to protectionist trade policy. It checks or controls the commodities which comes from foreign destination to domestic economy. If a country imposes some kind of quotas or artificial restrictions like tariff or custom duties on foreign commodity, the amount of commodity which comes from the foreign countries will be stopped. At that time, it helps the domestic economy to expand its market base. So it avoids all kinds of dumping of goods made by the countries of the world, And the seventh one is to discourage conspicuous consumption. See, whenever free trade exists, if there is no protection to the domestic industries in terms of customs and tariff, the conspicuous consumption will lead to the country and it results in high payment of foreign exchange to the foreign countries. That is why it has to be discouraged at first. If a country allows more and more of very conspicuous goods, then what about the very necessary goods which are very needed for the domestic people? And the next one is protection of defense industries. Defense is a very integral part of any economy. It has to be protected at first. If there is a free trade, then arms and ammunitions or some kind of explosives will be freely moved from one destination to another destination, and it leads to very difficult for a country's defense force or defense. And the one more is to attain self-sufficiency. If a country wants to achieve self-sufficiency in its production unit or production level, domestic industries need to be protected at first. If a country gives immense opportunity for the domestic industries, then only such industries will produce greater number of goods so that self-sufficiency can be achieved. And one more is preservation of culture. Culture will be preserved or nurtured if protection is given. Otherwise, too much of freedom which is given to the foreign countries or any countries of the world, then it ultimately leads to very threat on the domestic culture and heritage. Dear friends, so far we have discussed about the favorable arguments. Now we go for the against of protection or arguments against protection or disadvantages. The first is it leads to lethargy. lethargy means lethargic behavior of the domestic industries. If much of protection is given to an industry, then industry will not go for up to its capacity, and it leads to lethargic production processes. And the second one is political corruption. Political corruption will also take place. It means that the policy of protection has the potential to breed corruption. The owners of protected industries often resort to bribing the politicians, political parties, and the bureaucracy to get continued to protection. And one more is misallocation of resources, where the country supposed to allocate its resource will not be done properly. And the next one is exploitation of consumers, means if there is no competition, consumers will be worse off, because consumers will be having no choice about the commodities what they wish to have. And the next one is creation of monopolies. Whenever a government or the economy gives much of protection over an industry or the firm, then it ultimately leads to creation of monopolies. Whenever monopoly takes place, everything will be surrendered for the monopoly system. And the next one is danger of retaliation. Retaliation means it leads to the enmity between or among the nations. Say for example, if a country imposes much of tax over a particular commodity of a country, then it leads to enmity between or among the nations, and gradually it loses all kinds of cooperation. These are the very important advantages and disadvantages of protectionist trade policy. I hope you understood very well. Please go through the topic if you want to get insight much more. Thank you. Thank you for watching.